Hello everyone, welcome back to No Sugar with Everything Krause. Happy No Sugar Tuesday. If you're listening on a Tuesday.
Shit.
What?
If you literally are watching on YouTube right now, you will have just seen me like go to speak and realizing that if I spoke, laughter would have come out. And
Yeah.
I retracted those words and then I was just paused and frozen in midair.
We're both feeling very excited today because it is our official 1-year anniversary. Today is our 52nd episode, so that would be 52 weeks, aka 1 year of No Sugar. And I know we kind of prefaced it last episode, but today's this episode is actually the 1-year mark. So that's a pretty awesome feeling.
It's our baby's first birthday.
Yeah, no, literally. I'm like, my child is 1.
No Sugar Days 1.
So because it's our 1 year, it only makes sense to sing
No Sugar. Right? Why? Why are you so off?
You're off. You're like, no sugar.
Well, that's what it's doing for you. Like, I feel like I'm going so quick and then it's
You're
like,
not. You're like
even there.
Molasses. We've never sang it.
No
so
sugar,
like, no
no
sugar,
sugar.
no suganista, no sugar mama.
Okay, let's just redo it. Maybe it's just like we're off though.
That's what's happening now. So just welcome back to No Sugar, No Suganista, No Sugar Mama.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so like I said, 1-year anniversary, and today we really just want to do almost like a year in review.
Yeah.
You know, let's go through the year. We have been podcasting for a year, which if you asked us a year ago would have been like a crazy thing to look at and a crazy feat to get to. So
our goal in 2023 was launch a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So
literally,
that's literally. May I add that we did not expand on that further.
It was like one goal only. We met it in March. So
dude, I'm cracking up right now. Shit.
That just feels like classic us almost.
It was just like we needed to set that much of an achievable goal. Like so that we could achieve this far. Because I knew that it would go a whole year. Like I knew that once we started it wouldn't stop. But like I just needed to get to the point. I almost needed to break it down to be that simple. Like just launch.
Yeah. Like just get
just
it up.
launch. Because otherwise I think if we broke it down into bigger goals we would have never done it. So
yeah.
I'm
and
happy that we
there was a lot of mini goals that went into that as well. A lot of little steps, which was good. But I feel like the process of starting a podcast, we hyped up or overcomplicated for a while in our minds before actually doing it. So we'll get into all of that. I want to talk about the ins and outs, ups and downs, like all of our different episodes. We really just want to review it with you all because some of you have been with us from the start and some of our listeners might be new. They might listen sporadically. However you get your dose of No Sugar, we just want to recap it with you all. And I want to point out that me and Isol are both wearing our aloe sweatshirts. Unplanned, but it feels planned for the 1 year.
It feels like it's that 1 year energy.
It is. I literally woke up and was like, I'm gonna wear my aloe sweatshirt today. It is my favorite crew neck.
I will say that the chances of us both wearing this aloe sweatshirt are very high.
True.
I think it's both our favorite crew neck. And I did just take it out of the wash, so I was like, let me grab that off my rack.
Yeah, honestly, this was still hanging on my railing, drying. So this was just washed as well. So that does make sense for the both of us.
Or we can say it's that No Sugar 1 year in review.
It's both.
Energy,
we have a lot of sister telepathy as well. We'll end up in the same outfit if we both have like the same thing in different colors, like the sweatshirt or the same exact thing. We tend to wear like sometimes when Isol comes home on Sundays, she's in like the same thing I'm wearing, or I'm like, I literally almost put that on and then I didn't because I like wanted to go on a walk, so I put on leggings or something. So
it's like funny. Is it telepathy or do we just own the same wardrobe?
I think it's telepathy.
I'll go with telepathy too.
All right, let's get into our 1 year review, shall we?
Let's.
Let us.
It was a lot more awkward to say. So Kateri and I both spent some time reflecting on the past year, and I'm interested to see the thoughts that you bring up, Kateri, and I have some of my own thoughts, so I'm just going to dive right into them. The first thing that I was thinking about was really what was my favorite thing about podcasting and what was the most challenging. So I also want to pose that question for you as well, Kateri.
I would say I'm going to start with my favorite thing. Keep it nice and positive here. if I had to choose one thing to be my favorite, it would be having such open, honest conversations with you, Isabel. And like we always say, me and you do have these conversations and we get into deep conversations with each other. But the fact that we get to record them and then we can go back and have these and we're also putting them out for other people is really cool. You know, it's like we've always wanted to share in some way what we were having conversations about. Like before we had the podcast, we were like, how can we relay this on Instagram? Do we do a giant caption? Do we put it into an Instagram story? How can we even talk about all that we're saying in one Instagram post? And that was like all our mind went to was Instagram. So now that we have the podcast, we have the ability to have these deep, open, honest conversations with each other and not only create a really awesome relationship between the both of us, but also share it with so many people and really get out what we want to get out, regardless of how many people are listening. I feel like that's always what we wanted to do, and that was ultimately the goal when starting. So that's my favorite thing, is just the conversations we get to put out to people.
I definitely would say that goal has been met too. Like that reason for why we did want to start the podcast. I'm so happy that we did do it because it does fulfill that void. Like it did fill the area of how do we communicate more of our thoughts and our truest selves to EK? And it really has been through no sugar. I feel like our comfort zone has really gotten greater within talking to you guys because of this podcast. So I feel like that's very true, very valid.
I feel like so many times we wonder if our true selves are being shown on Everything Krause. We really want to be as natural and as real and honest as possible, but like we've talked about before, social media is kind of this fake world, and no matter how much you try and make it natural, it's still curated. And I feel like the podcast, if people are really interested in getting to know us, like the podcast is where you go.
Yeah.
You know, like that's our true
There's
selves.
no curation behind this. Like literally none these days.
Yeah. Other than deciding what we're going to talk about, it just kind of like free flows from there, and we just talk so open. So it's like if you want to learn more about us, come to the podcast. And that was such an important part of it for us. Such an important like box that we wanted to check off of, like, we're not going to be fake on the podcast. It's as open and honest as possible.
Okay, for me, I would say my favorite, this is difficult because honestly, it's my favorite part of podcasting over this year is definitely very aligned with yours, Katira. Like if I were to pick one thing, it'd be what you said. The whole point of this podcast was to really show our true selves. And I do think this podcast has achieved that, like we just said. So my favorite thing, I feel like my entire life, I feel like both of us, Katiri, all of our siblings, honestly, I've just felt like we have had this higher level frequency of thinking. I feel like we all think so deeply and wisely, and every conversation that I have with you or I have with our siblings really is so thought-provoking and really changes my perspective and makes me think about the actions that I'm going to be doing in the next 24 hours. Like these conversations literally affect my day to day. And I've always wanted to share that thinking with other people because I'm like, wow, this way of thinking has changed my life. It's amazing. But how do I make other people think that way? And it's not that I need to make other people think that way. The podcast showed me that I just need to elaborate on it and kind of open their perspective to it because they may not be aware of it. And I feel like that's what podcasting has really done for me, is it's allowed us to share these, and they may not be high frequency, they may be high to me, but like that's the point, like that's what I want to share. Allow us to share these higher frequency thoughts with all of you, and then at the same time see the effect on you. Like that's the double part to it, is now I am having conversations with people who are like, I never thought of it that way, and your episode showed me this and it's changed me for the better for like the rest of my life. And like that is the most rewarding sentence I think I could ever hear. And the amount of messages I know that Kateri and I got, and like when we say we get messages, like we're not fibbing or lying, like they are essays to us, and they are so sweet and so kind. And it's not even about like, oh, I'm so happy I affected them. It's like, wow, like I really changed that person's perspective, which is really hard to do, and we did it with the power of our words. And I think that's the favorite thing. My favorite thing about podcasting is that like we have the power of the tongue to speak our thoughts and share this wise, optimist perspective with the rest of the world.
It really is such a powerful thing when people send us messages, and like you said, it kind of is, it's a more in-depth message, and I feel like it then not only makes us feel good and feel like the work we're putting out is helping others, but then it is thought-provoking for us as well, because people do tend to go into their thoughts on it, or maybe perspectives they have had in the past, or other perspectives that they have on that topic, and then it makes us see multiple sides other than our point of view, and it just helps us further the conversation in our minds or with each other, maybe outside of the podcast. And it's such an amazing thing seeing, like you said, seeing our words help people. That is the greatest feeling of all, because if there's one thing that we get out of this, it is helping others, and that's all I could ask for, is being able to change people's lives in such a simple way. You know, I don't have the ability to go out and maybe do these grand gestures for every single person in the world, but if I can put an audio or a video out on a platform that people can use and access for free, that's such an amazing thing. And then they also have the ability to contact us and reach out to us, and we'll answer and engage in conversation. That's a really awesome feeling, and I feel like people appreciate that, and we probably appreciate it more than they appreciate it, but it really does like warm my heart.
That's why I also just need to add to that. That's why no sugar feels so right, I think, in both of our lives, Kateri, because people always say you find the greatest joy in helping others. Like, you can chase success and you can chase money all you want, but like true happiness comes from, I think for us in particular, like helping others. And that's why I'm like, this is the way for us, Kateri, because like we are so happy when we have these episodes and share this knowledge with you guys, because we know we're making you guys better, but also making us better. And like that's I think all we really want out of life is to leave a mark on, you know, the world is a big place to make a mark. I think we will do it one day, but like for right now, if it's 30 of you, I'd rather leave a mark on 30 of you than none of you. So I think that's also like the really beautiful part of it. So that would definitely be my favorite part. Now where I'm gonna switch gears is going into what, not the least favorite, but maybe the most challenging part of podcasting over the year, because there have been definitely some obstacles that I think we both have run into that we were not expecting. I know I have a few on my mind.
If I had to pick a least favorite, this is just like a one-liner, is the descriptions.
Oh my god. Literally fucking hate those things.
It's just like,
those things stink.
Yeah, Isabel handles the descriptions while I'm like doing the editing, so we disperse our roles good. And
it wasn't always that though.
It wasn't always
that.
That
started winter term when I got the template. Yeah.
It's just hard. Like, it's so hard to encapsulate everything we talk about in an episode in a description, and then we kind of leave it as like the last thing we have to do on the to-do list to like officially publish the episode or schedule it to be published. And that would be my least favorite if I had to choose something.
Yeah. And I also have to add on that is like we try and put in every single thing that we talk about in one description, because I want you guys to read it, and if you're looking for some particular advice, I want you to know it's in this episode. And I feel like we get caught up in that and try to make these lengthy descriptions, when the reality is like if you listen to it, you listen to it.
And like half the time, if I'm choosing a podcast episode to listen to like in another show, I'm not reading the entire description. I'm reading like the first couple lines. So like it's hard for me to remember that as a consumer when I'm being a creator, you know.
Definitely.
But yeah. So what would be the most challenging part? Do you want to go first, sis?
Most challenging. There was a lot of obstacles. You wouldn't think so, but like there was some like personal obstacles, some growth obstacles between Kateri and I, like learning how to work this together. But I think for me, the most challenging part was, as I just said about my most favorite part, was that we have a lot of thoughts. And when I say I have a lot of thoughts, I mean my head is spinning in circles with a million different ways I could take the conversation, a million different routes and sayings and quotes that I could give you guys and speak on. And I think when we start an episode, the most challenging thing for me is I want to say all of that all the time, that like sometimes I'm on a thought with you and I'll like be already on the next thought trying to fit that in, And then it starts to become not natural because I'm just trying to get it all out instead of just letting the genuine conversation flow. So it's really hard with like certain topics like body image. Like the amount of thoughts I had on body image were beyond an hour episode, and I only had an hour to get them all out. So I think just articulating my thoughts in a concise and clear way and being able to get the thoughts that really matter and that I want to share with you guys, like pulling out those parts was really difficult for me in the prep of the episode and also throughout the episode.
Yeah.
Like
Even just
actually
like,
recording.
yeah, even like remembering it during the episode. I feel like there's so many times mid-episode where like you or I will be like, wait, did I say that? Or like, did I touch on that enough? And we kind of get in our own heads about, did we harp on that enough? Or did we give enough like good insight? And chances are we did. Like when I'm editing, I'm like, oh no, we covered that great.
Yeah.
But when you're recording, it's so hard to think about what we said like 5 minutes ago because we say a lot in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, that's definitely a hard part about just being able to have such good conversations, but it could go so many different ways.
Yeah. Like now I understand why Joe Rogan's are
3 hours.
Yeah. Literally 3 hour episodes. I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
Exactly. Like there's 2 people. So there's a lot that can be said in those 3 hours.
How about you, sis?
I would say what I feel like the most challenging part is just like in terms of scheduling for me and you. We are 2 people on 2 different schedules, and working around that, it hasn't been challenging to the point where it stops us from like getting episodes out every week, but like we're both living life. It's not like our lives revolve around no sugar. Like hopefully one day we can put a lot more energy into it and it can be like a full-time job or, you know, a full-time sector of our life. But right now, like Isabel's in her senior year. I'm kind of starting new avenues myself. So it's like, how can we line up? So with like the recording and producing, it can get like stressful, making sure like, okay, like when are we recording? What time? Like we have to record today in order to get the episode out on Tuesday. So it always gets done, and it's not like the hardest thing to overcome, but I would just say it's challenging because it can be stressful, and then we'll end up, I don't like stressing out over something that I love so much.
Yeah.
But that's life. And if it wasn't stressful, then we wouldn't be putting in enough work. So it's okay that it can get stressful. But yeah, I would say just making sure we can like line up and get everything done. And we always get everything done. But like sometimes we might be finishing that description on a 9:30 on a Monday night, ready to go on Tuesday morning. You know, and that's the reality of it. It's like we're not always done the week before. And as much as we would love to have bulk recorded, so many of our thoughts come in real time that if we bulk record, it's hard. Like Isabel doesn't have 4 hours in the day to bulk record, and neither do I. And even like 2 hours, it's like we have like a short window that we record in, and then we could go with it. And yeah.
It's very hard, I think, sometimes when this is for all of you to hear, but doing it with a sibling, like Katira, you are my best friend, and sometimes I feel like it's very hard to feel business oriented when you are also doing it with your best friend and sister that I may call at the end of this episode for 30 minutes and like talk about what happened last night that made me so upset. Like that's also like my best friend that I go to. So it's hard to keep it business and want to push each other sometimes. And like there's been a lot of times where I've been frustrated with Kateri and bickered with her because I know that she's right and I'm just resistant. So that's also I think a part of the hard
like separating like oh, me and Isabel are having a great conversation on the phone. She's talking to me about her life. How do I now segue to be like, okay, so what are we recording on next episode of like, and then it's like the stress can overcome, but all of the challenges make it that much more rewarding. So when we say challenges, that's not even like a negative thing. It's more of just things that we've learned and that we wouldn't have known until we started. So I'm happy that we have them because without them, we probably wouldn't have this podcast. Or if we knew about them before, we probably wouldn't have launched.
Exactly. I want to touch on the point you just made, Kateri, about how all of those challenges really were essential in our growth of this podcast journey, because I really don't think we would be where we are without them. And we've become such better podcasters because of them. Like when I think back to the first episode and now I'm like, oh my God, like I literally can't believe we published that. And I listened to it and I'm like, our voices and how scripted it almost sounds and just like unauthentic. I'm like, oh my God, we have changed so much. So that sparks a new thought, honestly, of like, where do you think you've improved the most throughout this podcasting journey? Because it's been one heck of a journey for 52 weeks.
Yeah, definitely the confidence in recording. Like our first episode, it actually makes me laugh so hard when I go back and listen to it. Or like if I hear it, anything, I'm like, oh my God, we were so nervous. You know, rightfully so. But like we're not recording live, so you think that we would be a little less nervous, but I think we were just so worried that we needed to have like everything written down in terms of what we wanted to cover to like stay organized and stay on track. And it was like the intro to our podcast. We were like, it has to be perfect, like really explaining what we're going to talk about. So I would say my biggest thing I think we've improved on is the confidence in each episode. We sit down with each other now and it's almost like if we know the topic, we can talk for 45 minutes. And it just goes in all different directions. And by the end of it, we're like, whoa, I had no idea we were going to take it that way. And it did. It went that way. And it worked out amazing. And I'm so happy with the conversation. And I love it. And it just flows way more naturally now. Like, and maybe this is to a fault sometimes, but we do not plan what we're going to say.
Yeah.
Maybe in the back of our minds, or maybe like sometimes right before we start recording, we'll be like, let's make sure we cover like this and that. And as long as we cover those, whenever they come up, I'm good with. But it's kind of crazy. Like we just have so much confidence in what we're going to say and record on that we don't really need we used to have our iPads with us every episode. I don't know if people remember that.
I don't even know where that thing is anymore.
Where did I
put my iPad? I think I left it at home.
I was like, we had to have our iPads with us because that's where we had a Google Doc of our notes for each episode. And we have not written in that Google Doc in a while.
Like
we just don't.
I don't want
need
to.
it. Yeah. And I just think because we, like as Will said, we have so many thoughts when we just know the topic, and both of us personally, like individually have in the back of our minds like kind of where we want to go with it, then we bring those two ideas together naturally and it just flows so nicely.
Yeah.
So that improvement is so awesome to see. Just
Definitely.
From like episode 1, 2, 3 to now 52, it's crazy.
It's like, and everyone said that. Everyone was like, you're going to get much better and you're going to look back and laugh. And I was like, am I really though? And now that I look back, I'm like, oh my God, like we literally are different podcasters.
The amount of ums we used to say in the beginning, and I would try and cut them all out in the production because I was like, oh my God, like we sound so nervous. We sound like we don't want to say next. And it was like every other line. Crazy. Literally. And now it's like, okay, we might say it.
We may say it, but it's like so naturally of like an like it's not an where I'm trying to remember something in my head.
Shoot, what am I going to say?
Yeah,
what am
exactly.
I going to say?
For me, where I saw improvement the most is honestly, it's very much going to align with what you just said. Because honestly, that is where I've seen improvement the most. But I think I could spin a new thought into it, give you guys a new little perspective on it. But going off of what I said, like one of my challenges was articulating all of the thoughts, how I wanted to articulate them and getting all of those thoughts out there. And I think where I grew the most in this was I recognized that challenge early on and I was able to address it and fix it. And I think as we learned that it didn't need to be as scripted and that we could kind of just like have the topic and ramble for 45 minutes, I learned to be really okay with whatever came out of my mouth. And I was like, okay, well, that's the natural thought I had on it because it was so authentic. I just trusted my words and I trusted the advice I was giving instead of being like, oh, did I say that? Did I touch on that? Because like I didn't have time to think about everything I wanted to say. Whereas I sort of just like hopped on the podcast recording and like just let myself say what came to mind at that time. And I think that produced the best and clear thoughts for you guys and also for the conversation for Kateri and I. So that was a big part for me was the planning. As much as you need to plan, it almost was over planning for the words, and the words just needed to be natural in the moment. And I think learning that and realizing that was the recipe for the best episode of No Sugar that week, like that's what significantly improved my podcasting journey the most, definitely.
Yeah. Like learning to trust our words and learning to trust ourselves that it will naturally come out. And the big benefit to having two people on a podcast is you have someone to spring ideas off of and to ignite new ideas in your mind and new segues into what you wanted to bring up in the first place. like I might spark that idea in your head.
Exactly.
So
Like I
that's
feel like we've gotten much better at understanding each other in that sense too, where I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, like Kateri just said that, like I'm gonna let her ride with that because maybe I'll come up with a thought as she continues on with that instead of like rushing to get out my thought. It became more of listening to understand instead of listening to reply to you.
Yes.
And that was really important, I think, in our relationship for this podcast to work.
For sure.
Side note, I also just want to say that the podcast has significantly improved my exterior life, like outside of the podcast, because I've noticed myself in conversations like that episode we did about having confidence and being able to like be the social person in the room. My conversations are truly 10 times more efficient and more clear, and like I just like become more blunt, I think, and I think it's because of the confidence that comes from this, where like if I have a question in class, like I'm literally like, everyone's always like like maybe I shouldn't ask that, I'm literally like raise my hand, like call the teacher over, I'm like, wait, I'm literally so confused on this and this, and I like just tell them exactly what I need answers on or what I need help with, and I'm like, did that come from podcasting? Because I never used to be so direct with my words, and now it's just like if I need something, like I want more hot fudge on that Sunday, it's like call and ask for hot fudge.
Yeah.
And I've just recognized that I'm more confident in my ability to just speak in general.
Yeah. Because we have to be direct in the podcast. Like if there's something on your mind, you're going to say it, because if you beat around the bush, it's going to sound like a really bad podcast.
Exactly.
It's like, get to the point, ladies. We understand.
Exactly.
So going off of that, of course, when we look back on the year, as me and as well always say, we're very self-reflective, and that leads to us self-reflecting on, okay, where can we improve more? And there's a lot of things I want to improve in this podcast. I'm so proud of us, and I'm so happy and honored to be doing what we do, but I'm also like not fully satisfied yet. And there's so much more that I see for this podcast, and all we need to do is like work a little harder at what we want to achieve. So that's not a bad thing. It's not a negative thing to feel. And I am so happy that I can see that self-improvement and see the room for it, because without that, we won't be pushed to change in the next year. And I always say to myself, you can either be in the exact same place a year from now, or you can be where you imagine yourself to be if you just put in the work. So with all that kind of being said, I feel like there's areas of improvement in terms of like pushing out the podcast. I want to take more responsibility in terms of getting more reels out there, more YouTube clips. And we've started to do that more, but sometimes it slacks off. Sometimes we're a little more like pushy that week. It kind of just depends on the schedule of the week, and that's okay. But being able to push ourselves more and more so that we could reach potential sponsors, we could reach, bigger companies that maybe want to send us products or maybe want to come on the podcast, things like that. Like all of that, of course, is a goal for us with the podcast. You look at all these huge podcasts, of course they have sponsorships. They're making money off of the podcast. And that is a goal for us, to be there, but without putting in the work to push our podcast to grow, to change things around with our cover photo, our StreamYard graphic, how we put it up on YouTube. Like there's always room for improvement. So I think it's just the way we push it out and being more consistent with that. I definitely want to improve on, so that we can reach more people. We can grow our subscribers and grow our following, because yes, I'm proud of where we've come, but it's been a full year. That's 365 days. That's 52 episodes.
Yeah.
To me, where we're at in terms of our growth is not acceptable at this point.
Unacceptable. Yeah.
Like I want to take it way further. So I know that's like an overall vague like improvement of like growth.
Well, because I also want there to be some mystery and like the things that we do want to improve on.
Yeah, like that. I don't need to go into all the details of like where we can improve, because that'll be a 4-hour podcast. Because us, we like to go really deep into each and everything. But yeah, being able to grow that and grow our numbers, because as much as I love our community, I want it to get bigger, and I know it will. And has
I was
going to
say, like, I know it will if we just put in the work, and I think that's why Kateri and I want that improvement so much. Is like, okay, we had 52 weeks, we had 52 episodes to get comfortable behind the mic. We just said that was our win. Now looking at the improvements, like we have never really put in enough work to produce 6 reels consistently for each episode. And I just wonder, after looking at the viewership and after looking at how many random likers and followers that we get from them. I'm like, if we posted 6 reels for each episode consistently for a year, like let's say starting now for a year, where would this podcast be in a year? So I just feel like I have that in the back of my mind, and I'm like, man, it's me standing in my own ways. Like, there's so much potential here if we just tried, but we haven't even attempted it yet. Like,
I know.
Okay, we post 6 reels and it brings us nowhere halfway into the year. Okay, well, at least we tried. It's better than not even attempting. So I definitely see room for growth just in our overall podcasting game. And like I just said, we spent the first year getting comfortable. Now I really think I want to work on making this podcast a business and like treating it like one.
Consistent growth. We talk about consistency a lot with our fitness journey, and it applies to this as well. Like, you have to almost be more consistent with like how many reels are we posting, how many YouTube clips, so that the growth can consistently happen. And I feel like that's like our word almost for this next year, not like the new year, but like being
for the
consistent.
Year of no sugar.
We've been consistent with dropping every week, but so that's not a battle that we have to overcome anymore. Like, that's in the past. We're going to do it every week. We know that for a fact. This isn't stopping anytime soon.
Which people often highlight as like one of the biggest obstacles within podcasting is like podcasts die off after 20 episodes because it's exhausting. It's a lot. It's mentally draining.
The percentage of podcasts that fall short like in less than a year of being published it's a really big number, and that was honestly not even a concern for me ever.
No,
like if I was going to put something out there, regardless of our numbers, I was going to keep going because I was not failing at that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm exactly the same way. Love that.
So it was a long-winded answer, but
but that really is, I think, on both of our minds is like a big area for growth within the podcast. I'm going to take it in a route of area for growth within, I guess, type of content, or I don't know. I'm just going to go off on my thought because I don't really know what this is either, but I would say where I want to see the most improvement is I think like I speak for me, so I'm never speaking for you, sister, but you may agree. I literally call you sister on this. It's so funny.
I sometimes say like to Tyler, I'll be on the phone like, oh, like sister was doing this, or like I was just on the phone with sister, and he's like, why do you call her sister? Like, it's Isabel. And I'm like,
Kiri and I have gotten in this crazy, I don't know how it even started, but we just refer to each other as sister.
We were in Orlando with Brittany and the kids, and JP calls Amelia sister, or like sissy, like sister. And I started calling you that because I thought it was so cute, but I'm like, we're not children, but now it like stuck.
Now I like pick up the phone and I'm like, hey sister.
Yeah, hey sis. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so that'll never be rid of. But I think for us both, when we brainstorm episode topics, and it's not like we ever sit down and really brainstorm. Like, we went down the ChatGPT route of trying to like let it spark some ideas for us. But really the best episodes always come from, like we say, Kateri and I's natural conversations. And I feel like just picking out those moments of conversations that we have and realizing that like that could be an episode. I think Kateri and I get in our own way a lot when we think so deeply that the episode needs to be so content heavy and have a lot of value to it. And the reality is like, you guys are just like all of us. We have very similar thoughts, I'm sure. And, you know, as girls in the 20s, like, we're all experiencing very similar emotions in our 20s right now. So something that we may be thinking, like we always say, you guys could be thinking too. And as much as we do that, I think we could do that more, because I think there's a lot of missed opportunities for certain episodes that we thought weren't, you know, something that we could talk about long enough for, when it's like, okay, well, like, post a 15-minute episode on it. It doesn't need to be 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So I just think getting comfortable with the idea of like everything is content, everything is a topic to discuss, because that's the point of this podcast.
Yeah.
So that's,
and like writing that down, because a lot of times I think we'll say topics to each other like, oh, this could be talked on the podcast, and then we'll be doing something, or we don't have our phones on us, so we don't write it down, and then we forget about it. So looking
I just said and it only got
it got
crazy.
So looking at everything that we do as a way to bring it to the podcast, because like I said, it is such a reflection of us. And if you want to get to know us, come to the podcast. So really everything in our life is going to be brought here eventually.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been intense for quite a bit reviewing our no sugar in a year, but I wanted to go through all of that for you guys, and I wanted to do that for us as well, Kateri. But let's lighten the mood a bit and also discuss, we just said we had 52 episodes. That's a lot of content and topics covered, I want to get into what was your favorite, what resonated with you the most, what episode did you not like at all? Like, was there ones that you like published that we were like, ugh, like I don't even like that that's out there? Episodes that you want to touch on more. Like, there's definitely some episodes that I'm like, didn't like, we didn't hit that on the head there, or I want to talk more on this segment, etc., etc. So let's get into that area. I'm just gonna start with my favorite episode, which is really hard. I have a lot of favorites, but I think for me, my favorite is going to be coming more like as one of the recent episodes, because like I said, we grew so much within the journey that it also just felt better putting this episode out there. Mine would probably have to be the gratitude effect, because that episode was more personal, I think, to me, where I shared my journey of like my fall term at school and how that really changed me and shaped me. And it was kind of a realization within that episode of like, wow, gratitude really has affected me so much. And like putting that out there and telling you guys that little secret to just like a happier life that changed my life was like, I couldn't wait for you guys to listen to that one. So I feel like that was definitely one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, it is so hard to pick, like 52 episodes. If I go back and read all the different episode titles and descriptions, I'm like, oh, that was such a good one.
I know.
I love that. And I am proud of that we have so many that we truly love. And there's not many that I would say I don't like. Like, I don't really think I have one that I don't like. But my favorite, oof, this is hard.
It's really difficult. That took me like 20 minutes to decide on the gratitude effect.
Can I say two?
Yeah, you can say two.
My top two. One, a more recent one, is the fake reality of social media. I felt like I was really open and honest in that, as I am in all episodes, but I really felt like I was looking into my habits with social media and what it was maybe doing to my mind and my thoughts and my personal life. And it truly helped me kind of like get over this like hump of just like the fake reality that social media is and maybe how it's impacting me. So I really love that, because for me personally, it impacted my life. And I was so excited, like you said, I was so excited for everyone to listen to that, because I wanted people to recognize what I had recognized and bring it into their life, because it's so important, especially in the world we live in. So I loved that episode. And then another one, which was a little farther back, it was episode number 32, Embracing Imperfect Faith. I loved that because, again, another really open, honest conversation and talking about the imperfections of faith. And I love when we talk about our faith in any episode. We have a couple on it, and it just showed that we're not perfect. And although we talk about it on the podcast, we have so much growth to be had, and so much growth to be done and work to be put in. We're not going to be perfect, but opening the door to our listeners to share that with each other, because I do think it's so important to share our beliefs and our faith with people, and sharing it in a way that is inviting and makes people feel less intimidated was really important for us. And I feel like that episode really hit that on the head of like, this isn't a scary thing. This doesn't need to be an intimidating thing. And we're not going to tell you, you have to do this, this, and this, because we're still learning and growing as well. Here's how we're approaching that.
Yeah.
So I loved that. I thought that was really just a great topic.
Those are really solid episodes. Those are really, really solid episodes. Like I definitely loved those as well, because one, like you said, the fake reality of social media, it's almost like one of those realizations you have of like, I can't believe that I just discovered this, like that thought way, and now I want everyone to think this way. It's like one of those things is like, I can't believe people don't know this yet. Like, I can't wait for them to find out.
Yeah.
So I definitely resonate with that. And regarding our faith, I just feel the same way. Like, I've always wanted to discuss our faith because it's so big and important in Kateri and I's lives. And I don't know, it's such a personal thing to talk about, but talking about it on here made it very easy.
So staying on the theme of the episodes, what's an episode that you feel like that we've covered, but we didn't like fully hit the mark on, and we know for a fact we want to come back to that topic and dive into it more, because we feel like now we're more confident, we're more knowledgeable, and just like have more ability to
talk about it.
Like dive into it better than we did before.
I think for me, this would definitely be just the topic of food and nutrition, you know, not from a nutritionist perspective, just having more open and honest conversations about really learning a healthy relationship with food, because the way that society teaches us is diet culture. They teach us to have an unhealthy relationship with food and to eat all these unhealthy foods. And I would say a big part of you and I's life, Kateri, really is the food that we put into our body. Like,
Yeah.
we know that we say that all the time to you guys, but I actually met someone like recently at the beginning of fall term who like has grown to know me, and one of their biggest observations about me now was like, I had no idea that you were like not like a nutritionist, but you just like had like you think about the food that you put into your body. I just had no idea it was that big of part of I had no idea it was that big of a part of your life. And I was like, yeah, it really is. It's what makes me me. And I think I would want to talk about that more on here, just because we've learned a lot with our relationship with food since the start of this, and since we posted an episode called Food is Fuel. It's one of our main episodes on this topic, and I loved that episode too. And I just think we could go so much further and deeper into the conversation of food, eventually have like a nutritionist interviews, like, and just keep that building and building, because that topic is never ending.
Yeah.
So I would like to consistently always touch on that, and definitely a lot more frequently.
I think that's one of those topics too that we know we want to have a couple guests on too. Like, there's so many people in the health space, and that's just one of those that, like you said, we want to dive into more. I agree completely. It's like
we talk a lot about not mental health a lot, but mentally processing thoughts a lot. I feel like that's what a lot of our topics revolve around. I would like to talk about physical fitness and biohacking and all of the health industry, because that's such a big part of us that we don't really share.
Yeah, I agree. An episode that I feel like I definitely want to circle back on, or like a topic for me, is the one where we talked about like dating ish in your 20s, but really just about relationships. I feel like we've both grown a lot since that episode was released, and not that I think either of us would change our viewpoints that we stated then, and like what you were saying about your boxes and all of that in that that episode, felt like all that was really good. But I am in a relationship. I've been in it for over 2 years now. I've learned a lot in those 2 years in a relationship, and sometimes I don't know if it's necessary to like bring it to the podcast. And that episode like touched on relationships, but at the time of recording that, like, I was still part-time in Florida. So like a lot has changed, right? I've worked on a lot of things since then in my relationship. So being able to talk about that more, definitely would love to bring that back up. I don't know how yet, because obviously I'm in a different spot than Isabel is. Like, Isabel's not in a 2-year relationship and I am, but I think that could also give two really good perspectives of like me saying things, and as someone who's not in a 2-year relationship, Isabel could like ask me questions almost that our listeners could be possibly thinking about as well while I'm speaking. So rehashing that, because I do think it's a huge part of my life, and I've learned a lot, and I would love to like dive into it a little bit more.
Yeah. And like we said, there's a lot of topics that, yes, we've covered, but the point of this podcast really was to grow. So like if you had those same beliefs as in that episode, like, yes, you believed at the time, but I fully expect you to have a different thought process on all of that.
Yeah.
It's been a year since then. So like,
exactly.
I know you have new thoughts, and I know that everything that you meet, like, even if what we said in that episode isn't true anymore, it was true at that time, and it's just a testament of how much we've grown. Exactly. So I would like to revisit that, and I do think a conversation, maybe Kateri, we could do an episode where we broke it down to like only based on like relationships for you, and like I kind of can ask you the questions, because I am gonna have some that maybe are more relatable for others, because I haven't been in a 2-year. So that may just be an easier way for us to break it down, to kind of dive more into the relationship, because the hard part about having us both is that's like the one thing we're not aligned on, is like I don't have the same experience as you in that. So it's going to be hard for us to communicate on it when we both have such different situations that we're living in. Yeah. So
almost like you as the guide, like the host for the episode. That's a great idea.
I think that could be a good idea to really dip into the relationship topic more, because I definitely want to.
Going off of that, I'm just curious, do you have any episodes that you're like, I really don't like that episode, or you just weren't the most confident or like comfortable with it? I don't know. kind of like hard because like I said,
That's
I
hard.
love all our episodes, but
Yeah, like I really do love all of our episodes, but there is one that comes to mind pretty quickly, which is kind of funny. Yeah, I'm like, it
she's
actually
like,
came to mind
I've
pretty
been waiting
quickly.
for this.
Probably, no, not probably, definitely our conversation on body image. We released that episode pretty early on into
I think
the
it was number
podcasting.
3.
Yeah, I'm like, that was pretty quick, and I would like to. There's a few things on that. Like, there's a few reasons why I don't love
4.
that.
Hold
Episode
on.
4.
Just had to correct episode 4. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy you did because I did want to know the number.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not that it's my least favorite or that I didn't like the episode. I think it's a really important topic to talk about. There's just multiple things here for me. One, as we've been repeating this entire episode, we have grown so much since then that I'm like, I would love to have that conversation as a do-over because I was so worried about articulating the right things during it. Like, I had so many thoughts on it that I wrote down all those thoughts and I wanted to get them all across. Whereas I wish I could just authentically talk about it now to you guys because I posted a story the other day on Everything Krause, and like the feedback that I got from people and just hearing how many people share these similar thoughts and how unnoticed it is like, I would love to just, and that video I posted on EK was so authentic and so blunt and honest, and I would love to be that honest on this podcast.
Yeah.
Talking about that. But also regarding that topic, why it's not really my favorite is, for some reason, when we talk about body image, it almost feels like I'm pulling a victim card. It almost feels like I'm, like, I don't know, it's very hard for me to sit here and talk about my insecurities of, oh, I'm not happy in my body and I'm not happy with my beauty, when like some people could look at me and think like, you're the most beautiful girl ever, and it's not, that doesn't invalidate my feelings, but for some reason it makes me feel like, well, yeah, like I do know I am beautiful, I do know that I am fit because I do work out every day, like I'm definitely not obese, and it's just the reality of the situation. So I kind of feel like a victim, but it's also the reality that I do still share these thoughts, and that's why I do think it's important to share that conversation, because it like opens your mind as to like, you may be looking at Kendall Jenner and being like, oh, she's the best body ever. She could be so upset and crying over that because like she notices 1 inch of fat, and that's her own insecurity. And that's what I learned, that like it's good to talk about it because it is a journey for everyone, but it's just a bit uncomfortable for me to talk about.
It's very personal. Like, and it's very individual as well, because you might say something and I'm like, how could you think that? Like exactly what you said. But that doesn't invalidate how you're feeling. Like, you're going to feel how you feel, and you kind of have to be the one who works through that. Like, I can give you advice, I can say things, but I can't change your mind. And same thing, like I could be thinking something, and no matter what you tell me, if I'm not willing to make the change and change the conversation, it's not gonna stick. And yeah, that's not always fun to talk about and like share. And exactly you said, like pulling the victim card is weird. It feels weird for us. And I'm not looking for people to be like, oh, but you guys are so beautiful, like you shouldn't feel that way. It's like, okay, thank you, I really appreciate that, and I know I'm beautiful, and I do think of myself that way, but I have my moments. And how to kind of articulate it is hard. It's a tough topic.
And I also think it brings to surface like almost like confronting these negative thoughts about yourself, but not like confronting them, like recognizing that you have them, which makes them feel a little bit real sometimes. So sometimes when I'm talking about like, oh, I feel this way, I'm like, I don't want to talk about how I feel not beautiful in that, like, because I feel like I'm speaking that into existence. And
exactly, like I don't want to give it
I don't want to give it the energy. I'm like, no, just like flip your mindset on it. So I think, and that's, you've probably seen that throughout this podcast, is like we're very growth oriented. I only want to focus on how I can improve, and that topic sort of feels like it's one on, I'm focusing on the negative, and like I'm being like, that's why it feels like it's such a victim card. I'm like, I'm being sitting in my own emotions and my own feelings. It's like, strap on a pair and get over it.
Like it feels like if we did a whole nother episode talking about it, we're giving it way more energy than it deserves, as opposed to if we just had like a 10-minute conversation on it between ourselves or with yourself, you could recognize the growth and then make it without giving it so much energy that like it overpowers you.
Exactly.
Like I want to leave these episodes feeling uplifted, not feeling like a little more down.
And that's how I felt that episode made me feel. So that's just the one that stood out as a red flag for me.
Exactly. And like you said, that was episode 4. it was one of those beginning episodes where we used to think we needed to jam pack everything into one episode, and bringing that episode into literally the beginning of the podcast was kind of a scary thing, but we were like, it needs to be insightful and have like openness and rawness and truth to it. Like we wanted so much to be in that episode that we were so worried about what we were saying and that we wouldn't cover everything.
Yeah.
That I feel like it was like, not saying it was bad, I still appreciate that episode for what it was.
Yeah, people loved it. That's the funny thing.
Yeah.
It's like we got great feedback on that. And I remember
Great
being like,
feedback,
oh my God, okay.
Yeah. But I think it could be done in a better way of like how we record now, of just letting the conversation flow.
Yeah.
That would feel much more authentic to us.
I think so too.
Before we wrap it up today, I want to give just one piece of advice. If you have been thinking about starting a podcast, you have any inkling that this is something that you want to do, take it from two people who are now a year in and so happy that we just made the decision to start. That's all you have to do, is just start. And that's a vague piece of advice. There's a lot of ways you can start. Start by coming up with your title. Start by coming up with, what do you want the podcast to be about? Like the overarching theme of it. And start there. Like brainstorm episode ideas. Okay, if I were to start this, what podcast episodes would I talk about? How would I share it? Do I want it to be video, not video? Like you just have to start thinking of things that get the wheels moving in your mind. And you have to, if you're feeling this way, just take the leap of faith and do it, because it's so rewarding. And who knows, maybe 10 episodes in, you're like, this isn't for me. Or maybe 10 years down the road, you're still podcasting. You never know where it could lead you. And I feel like no matter how many podcasts there are out there, how many different topics that fall under the same theme or are all different, it doesn't matter, because your voice deserves to be heard as well. And there's a lot of self-help podcasts out there. And if we looked at all of them and been like, we don't need to be in that space, then we wouldn't be here. So you can't compare it to all the people that are already existing, and just think about like you in your own little bubble and just go for it.
Yeah, exactly right, Kateria. I was just going to say, like, a lot of us don't start because we're so resistant due to what's potentially in the future. So don't live in the future, live in the present right now. And the only thing that you can do in the present is to start your podcast. So if that's something you want to do, launch and adjust. You'll figure it out.
Launch and adjust. That's my favorite line, my favorite saying, and like the piece of advice I take with myself in every venture that I do, literally. So we just want to thank you guys again so much for everything that you've done to help us grow and help us have these realizations within ourselves and personal growth, and sharing us, subscribing, supporting, liking, following, all of that. You guys have been so tremendous in this year and such a massive part of our life over the past year. And I can't wait to see where this next year takes us. I know that we both, especially after recording this, I'm like, there's so many things I want for this next year. And I'm just going to get like writing. If I just like write it down, pen on paper, just get like the wheels turning a little bit. So thank you guys so much for an amazing year, truly.
Kateria and I really mean from the bottom of our hearts, like whether you started with us, whether you joined in the middle or you're joining just now, we really do appreciate every single one of you, because you are the reason that we are 52 episodes into this and are just beginning. Truly, the journey is a long one yet to come. So very exciting. And on that note, I will leave you guys for the 52nd time to tell you what to do. Like, subscribe, comment, follow, interact with us. Please push out this podcast. If this resonates with you, if any topic or any certain area of conversation, send it to a friend. We're looking to grow this next year. We want to, as we said, expand and grow this platform much, much larger and reach an even bigger community. So please help us do that and build a bigger community for yourself as well.
Yes. So we hope you all have an amazing rest of your week as always, and we will see you next time.